What is up, everybody? I'm No Lux Given here with your afternoon snap, and today we're going to take a look at a game from a recent gold Conquest run with my Kingpin Silver Surfer list that I showcased a few days ago. This deck is a lot of fun, and it's pretty powerful too. It got me a few wins a few times at the Infinity level. One of those runs was stopped by a bug, but that's a story for another time. We're going to take a look at this gold game here. This is a 20-minute long Conquest match, and I just thought it was a lot of fun. So I'm going to showcase it here and just talk about some of my decisions. So turn 2, I play the Goose in Vibranium Mines. I actually don't mind hitting Vibranium to curve out a little bit easier. And then I storm into Oscorp Tower because most people won't play there unless they've got Electro that they're hoping to pass on to their opponent. So kind of knew what was happening there when I saw my opponent played to Oscorp Tower. It was either Electro or a Storm of their own, but we're gonna battle for the flooding location here with Maximus. That's just a good way to potentially win the flooded location, and then Silver Surfer can help put you over the top later on. And we also have some potential interesting plays with both Kingpin and Fisk Tower combined with Juggernaut, though we don't want to knock anybody into that flooded location. If I knew I was going to draw Juggernaut, then I potentially could have just gone for the Kingpin into the flooded location. That could have been kind of cool, but now I think my opponent's possibly going to be playing Galactus here. So my plan is to Juggernaut in the Fisk Tower, giving up the option of taking my opponent's cards out on the final turn with that Juggernaut, just because either of those two places that Galactus could land are both fine for me. Either Galactus lands in the Vibranium Mines, and that's a Goose location, and maybe I could do something with that, though it's actually a little bit tougher with Nimrod, or it just lands in the flooded location and we just don't have to deal with it at all. Now, it winds up landing in the Vibranium Mines, but it's actually Destroyer. So we'll see how we can battle up against this list. I do think this is a cool list, and I've been seeing this a lot more running around since playing against this player here. This clip is probably from the middle of last week or so, probably like Wednesday of last week. It takes me a long time to get these clips from my phone onto my computer. I think I might have mentioned that at the start of this video, but they're like, this is a 20-minute clip, a 20-minute screen recording, and that's just a lot of data, and then I got to transfer it over and download it, and it just takes a while. So let me know if you enjoy this style of video that is like post commentary highlighting some sweet Conquest mode matches. So for the final turn here, my opponent hits us with a Wolverine and then a Venom, killing their Destroyer and their Nimrod and sending a bunch more power elsewhere. But with Silver Surfer, we are just barely going to be able to grab the win. I didn't bother battling in Vibranium Mines. I knew we were done for there, but we are able to just barely grab a win. And this is like a classic Marvel Snap end of game screenshot that I think is really cool to show people that are just getting into the game. My opponent has much more total power than I do. They're beating me by 24, and then I'm beating them by 3 and by 3 in the other two locations. So I think that's always fun when games line up like that, because it's like, okay, my opponent did so many more cool things than I did that game, but I just did it slightly better in the locations that mattered. And my opponent, as you can see, is a pretty good sport throughout this entire thing. I think that those emotes came through on the recording in here. But now turn 2, we've got two different options to play, and Goose does seem pretty good against my opponent's deck. Can stop their Destroyer, can stop their Galactus, and whatever else they might be running at the top of the curve. Null could be a possibility, who knows. But I'm going to Goose this unknown location. Don't really want to throw Goose into Necrotia because it won't actually give me any power there. And I don't really want to throw it into Grand Central either because my opponent could still cheat in a big card and go over the top of me in Grand Central regardless of me trying to lock them out there with Goose. So I'm just going to throw Goose into that third location, and we get rewarded as Nidavellir is location number 3. My opponent plays an Electro on turn 3 to my Mr. Fantastic for 4 power, pumping up those other 2 lanes. And now on turn 4, what do we want to go with? There's actually kind of an interesting play here where you can Maximus on turn 5, and then your opponent draws 2 cards before they add a card there from Grand Central, which can throw off like what they are intending to cheat out. So that's always kind of cheeky, but I just decided to go for the Maximus, and then this turn, I'm going to hit them with the Cosmo. I'm going to try to if my opponent wants to play Galactus this turn, then they have to play it into Necrosia. So that was also part of the theory behind the Maximus. I wanted to retain priority going into turn 5 in case my opponent wanted to drop a Galactus, and then I could surprise them with Cosmo. So that was really my whole thought process this game, but again, they are playing with Destroyer and not Galactus. Now they are going to Venom that Destroyer once again, this time just off of the Grand Central, so not really getting too much additional value there, and then we just drop a Kingpin, but that's great because that's a free 3-cost card that I can then pump up with the Silver Surfer, and we're actually close enough that we can use Silver Surfer to swing this power in all lanes. Polaris puts me up to 18 in Grand Central, then Silver Surfer will put me over the top, but my opponent has Arnim Zola on the final turn, which means now I am way overcommitted in Grand Central. If I had played Polaris over in Nidavellir, that actually would have been enough, and I didn't even need more power in the Grand Central. So kind of worked out a little bit awkwardly for me. If Polaris would have gone in Nidavellir, that's 12 more power, and I would have been able to win both of those 2 locations. But I think in this one, it might even be the opposite. We've got to see. No. Well, it's close, right? It's close. About what I was talking about last time with bigger differential being the losing player, but yeah, I don't know, just didn't quite work out. Was not expecting the Arnim Zola, but Arnim Zola into Venom to destroy your Nimrods again. It's a lot of power, and a very, very cool deck for my opponents here. We're gonna grab a level or a tier 3. I'm playing too many different games. We're going to grab a 3-cost card from Camp Lehigh, but unfortunately it's not a great 3-cost card for me, at least initially. There are some things that you can do with Wave. The most obvious of them is you can just play Wave on the final turn of the game, and it's a 3/5 that gets pumped up by your Silver Surfer if you're missing 3-cost cards somehow. But the other thing that it can kind of do is lock your opponent out of the game in conjunction with Goose. So that could be something to look forward to. But for here, I'm just going to battle for Asgard. So I'm going to play Maximus into Asgard. It's really the only good card that I have this turn that just adds power to the board. It is a little bit awkward because it draws my opponent's 2 cards, and then the upside to that is supposed to be that maybe I will also be able to draw 2 cards off of it, so it's a little bit silly. We have priority here going into turn 4 again this game, so I'm going to Cosmo into Asgard. My opponent isn't even going to play there, but I am going to be able to win in that location. Looks like Cosmo into Central Park would have been a little bit better for me, as my opponent drops a Carnage, which I don't believe at this point I had seen in the matchup. Hadn't seen the Carnage or the Psylocke, and I guess the debris is actually from Camp Lehigh. So that just happened to work out nicely there for my opponent. But here's the important thing. I draw 2 cards off Asgard, trying to find the namesake of the deck, Silver Surfer. And I do not. So it is a little bit awkward here, because I'm not going to be able to do too much with it. I'm just hoping that I could potentially draw Silver Surfer next turn. My opponent snaps, and I think that's probably enough for me to retreat here. Maybe I play it out for 1 more turn, hoping to draw the Silver Surfer. Can't actually remember what I do. Okay, I do play it out for 1 more turn because I guess if you look at my deck right now with the 2 additional draws from Asgard, I'm actually very likely to hit the Silver Surfer, but I don't. I draw Brood. The idea now would have been that I could have played Silver Surfer, and you can see I'm up by like a decent amount in Camp Lehigh right now, though I'm going to lose all of that lead when they just play like anything there, and there's no way that I can really win in Central Park and in Asgard. My opponent might be expecting the Silver Surfer, but I don't actually even have it. So yeah, not great for me. I got to get out of this one, and we lose a few more cubes because I stayed in it. We lose one additional cube because I stayed in it for that 6th and final turn to see if I could draw the Silver Surfer. Was pretty likely to because I had already drawn 2 cards, but you know, what can you do? This game we've got Titan seems like a good location for my opponent's deck and a pretty bad location for me. And then Space Throne, also a pretty cool location for my opponent's deck. Specifically because they've got the biggest card in the matchup. They can play a Destroyer there, and I'm not going to be able to win in the Space Throne. They play a Wolverine that winds up flipping over into Nidavellir, and then I draw a 2-drop on turn 3. So a little bit awkward, but Polaris is really, really good in the Space Throne, and I think my opponent might have not been considering that. And that's the main reason that I stayed in this game. And then the other cool thing that I can do is I can Storm Titan. So I'm just debating how soon I want to Storm Titan, because if my opponent plays Electro this turn, I need to Storm Titan right now, or my opponent's going to be able to get value from that by playing a 6-cost card on turn 4. So I'd like to avoid that, so I'm just going to Storm Titan right here on turn 3 and snap back. We're going for it, and we're going to play for the maximum of 4 cubes in this one. And my opponent does have the Electro, but Storm is going to prevent any Arnim or potentially Galactus, but mostly Destroyer. It looks like my opponent is mainly focused on playing Destroyer strategies. They could play for the flooded location here. That's definitely a risk, but I know I have to Polaris into the Space Throne at some point before my opponent decides to play there, and they do destroy the Wolverine before I am able to Polaris it, which is awkward because Nidavellir gave my opponent a priority, but Polaris will still move the Wolverine back into the Space Throne, and luckily it only goes up to 4 power. So I'm still winning in the Space Throne, and I'm winning in the flooded location. And this actually means that I win the game. Because now I can Cosmo, I've got priority, I just dropped Goose in addition to the Cosmo, but unless they have like Jeff the Baby Land Shark to potentially get around the restrictions of the flooded location or the Space Throne, they're not going to be able to influence those other locations because I'm going to stop all on reveal abilities. I guess they could have the Living Tribunal, but short of that, I think that Cosmo is going to stop anything that they could potentially come up with, including Arnim Zola to move Venom over into the flooded location. Though that wouldn't have helped them too much in the Space Throne, so felt like we were still kind of covered. And then on the final turn, I'll get to drop Maximus plus Mr. Fantastic, a little bit more power into Space Throne, not that I need it, and then a whole bunch more power into Nidavellir, and that is actually enough that I win all 3 locations in this game. So feeling pretty good after this one. We're able to win 4 cubes and get back in the lead. Now we are up 2 cubes, 4 cubes to my opponent's 2. So my opponent has to win the next 2 games. I only have to win either one of the next 2 games, and we'll make it, we'll be the ultimate victor here. So things are looking pretty good for me. Let's see if we can draw a 2-cost card for turn 2. Central Park is going to be that 2nd location. So if my opponent is playing Galactus, which I don't think they are, we will be able to stop that. But they do have Killmonger and Death, so Squirrels are probably better for my opponent. On turn 3, I'm thinking that there's a few different thoughts in my head here, and I can't quite remember exactly what makes me decide to Storm the Isle of Silence, because initially I was thinking Murder World, and against a normal deck, Storm in Murder World is a pretty good play. Same reason for Oscorp Tower that I talked about in Game 1. Or maybe I didn't really even get to talk about it that much because I was doing the intro, but your opponent isn't likely to play in that location, which means storming that location will start you with a 2-power lead from the get-go. And I think what I was thinking here is that now that I know that my opponent actually wants to play to Murder World and wants to play to Oscorp Tower, I'm better off storming other locations because, like, okay, what if they want to play Electro and then they just decide to play it in Isle of Silence? Then I really get them if I storm the Isle of Silence too. But what I wasn't thinking about was pretty simple. What if they just play Wolverine and then Murder World gets to destroy that for free. And it kind of backfires on me pretty good here as my opponent plays Wolverine into Murder World, then that Wolverine flips into the flooded locations. Now I'm losing the flooded location, which is exactly what I tried to avoid by not playing to Murder World, and yeah, just awkward. So probably could have just played to Murder World there. Maybe it was worse against specifically Electro, but we do have Juggernaut. That puts me up to 6 power, which would put me into the lead in the flooded location. So we're doing okay. Now my opponent actually plays a Carnage this turn. So we're going to kick out the Carnage. The Wolverine actually got kicked out, and now we're winning 6-0 in that flooded location. So fair enough. We don't have priority for turn 6, but my opponent doesn't have an extra energy to play like, I don't know, anything super crazy here. I think I'm just going to try a little bit to get priority back, but then also just to add as much power as I possibly can on the final turn of this one. My opponent does play a Killmonger. That'll blow up some squirrels, and then I play Maximus plus Luke Cage for 9 power into Murder World. Might have been a mistake to give my opponent 2 more card draws. In hindsight, it's like more opportunity to draw like Death or something. And yeah, it's kind of a spoiler. That's what they're gonna do. But I'm just gonna try to commit as much power as possible to Murder World. And well, this is kind of a bait because my opponent not only has Death, but I drew them their whole deck, and I guess Death is super cheap this game. I don't even know how it got exactly that cheap. I mean, they blew up 6 squirrels and then also a Wolverine twice. And that gives them, yeah, that's actually just enough. That's 8 cards dead. They can Arnim Zola their Death and win the other 2 lanes with that. So my opponent gets the first win here, and now it's just one game. It's just best of 1. It's all come down to this. 2 cubes left for each of us, 2 health left, and we're playing in high stakes mode already as we are in round 6. So this is for all the marbles, all the cubes, and the infinity ticket. So let's see who will come out on top. We've got the turn 2 Goose, and we've got the Raft as location number 2. We also have the Lizard as a play, but Goose makes a lot more sense because if we know my opponent's going to fill up that location, then let's not play Lizard there. So I just run out Goose on turn 2. Would love to draw Brood. That would be pretty fantastic. And we're going to Attilan this game. Unfortunately, we don't draw Brood though, so that part is a little bit unfortunate. I wind up dropping Kingpin. I could have also just played Maximus here. Maximus into Attilan means we give my opponent 2 cards, we play a bigger card, and then everything gets shuffled back in. So that was something that I could have considered. I just play the Kingpin because I feel like there's a lot of cool setup to potentially do with the Kingpin towards the end of the game. And then we mirror dimension and we get a second Raft. Now we still haven't drawn Brood. That's the awkward part. Would have really loved to have drawn Brood this game. I think we could have done some fun stuff with that. But really, I don't even have that many crazy options here. I'm just going to wind up playing Juggernaut into that center Raft location. I do have priority. I figure maybe my opponent will play for the Raft, potentially try to play Venom or Carnage or something this turn. If we can kick it out, we could maybe disrupt some of their plans. They're actually going to wind up going for Nimrod, which is a little bit awkward. And from here on turn 5, I'm just going to fill up that Raft and see what we get as our free 6 cost card. It is going to mean that my opponent can probably potentially beat me in the Raft. They are still Electrode, so it is going to be a little bit awkward for them to impact multiple locations potentially. And then we're going to get that free 6 cost card. We also have Silver Surfer. We can add 4 more power to that center location, and we get my free 6 cost card, and it is the Infinite. Definitely an awkward one to pick up. My opponent then Arnim Zolas their Nimrod, which adds 2 Nimrods to the other 2 locations. And that means that they're beating me by a lot in the flooded location. They're beating me by 8, so Silver Surfer's not going to be able to flip that. I can't use the Infinite. If that was like anything else, we'd be good. But now I've got to win both the Raft Mark II and Attilan. And in the Raft, I'm down by 8. which means I basically have to brood that location and then Silver Surfer the other location. That's like the only avenue that I have here to victory, and I know it's not going to cut it. So I'm not even sure if I make that play. I might make the other one just to, you know, see what happens. But my opponent's got me at this point. I know I can't even, realistically battle for the raft here. So nothing can happen. My opponent throws down a Venom. That's going to send 2 more Nimrods to the other location. Pretty good play by my opponent. Adds 3 power to the board in the raft and then 12 power over in Attalon. Pretty hard to predict there. And that's going to mean that we lose this one, unfortunately. But I still thought it was a really, really fun battle. It went to 6 games, had a lot of back and forth, even in the individual games themselves. I was playing a cool deck, my opponent was playing a cool deck, and also being a pretty good sport about their wins and their losses, I felt. So thought I would showcase this game. Let me know if you want to see more post-game commentary, kind of in a similar vein, if it's worth my time to do it. I've got a bunch of sweet clips because I've been playing a lot of Conquest, which is more or less gonna go away. I mean, I'm probably going to wind up playing a lot more on the ladder during the start of next season, which I guess starts like tonight by the time you're watching this. So yeah, by the time you're watching this, it might already be next season, and then I'll be playing more ladder. But let me know if you want to see more ladder, if you want to see features of cool hot locations, which I do enjoy doing. But I haven't really looked at the hot locations since I stopped playing ladder and moved my focus to Conquest. But Conquest is really tough to make content for, and easy to make content for, because I think that every battle, or most battles, are pretty engaging. But at the same time, it's tough because the files on my phone are just so big. So maybe that means I gotta do a little bit more streaming. But for today, that's gonna be it for me. Thank you guys very much for watching. I'm No Lux Given. Peace.